morning, everybody. If you would please take a moment and get in your seats. We would like to get the semi-annual town meeting started. Can I have that, please? No, that's mine. Can I borrow that for a second? All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Carlson. I'm the Chair of Board of Selectmen. Due to some circumstances regarding town moderator resignation a few weeks ago, coupled with our town clerk who is on extended leave, I am going to be the presiding officer for this town meeting. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, please bear with us, and I'm going to ask Paul Cook, our assistant town clerk, to come up and read the return of the warrant.
To either of the constables of the town of Grafton in the county of Worcester, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Grafton, qualified to vote in elections and town affairs, to meet in the Grafton High School football field located at 24 Providence Road, Saturday, November 7th, 2020, to act on the following articles. And you are directed to serve this warrant by posting up an attested copy thereof in some conspicuous place in each of the precincts of the town at least 14 days before said meeting. Hereof fail not, and make due return of this warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk at the time and place of meeting as aforesaid. Given under our hands the 29th day of September in the year of our Lord 2020. Peter Carlson, Chairman, Doreen DeFazio, Vice Chairman, Colleen Roy, Clerk, Matthew Often, Edward Prisby. I have complied with the requirements of the above warrant and with the town of Grafton bylaws by posting an attested copy of the warrant in some conspicuous place in each of the precincts of the town on the above date. Signed, Cynthia Ide, Constable of Grafton.
Thank you, Paul. Before we get into the motions, just need to ask the town meeting floor, I would like to have a motion to nominate Ray Mead and David Robbins as deputy moderators. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those, raise your hand for aye. Nay? Declare the motion carried. Thank you. Before we get into reading the first motion, I just wanted to take a moment and explain the format's a little bit different today with the way we used to do town meeting. We are going through what's called a consent agenda type of meeting, where we are grouping articles of like that require either a simple majority, 2/3, and so on and so forth in the same motions. This is to save time. It's to limit exposure for people during the pandemic, and we expect that the town meeting should go a little bit faster than typical. At any time that anybody would like, as we go through each one of the consent motions, for example, we'll read consent motion 1. If anyone would like to hold on an article, they may do so by raising their hand and saying hold. Keep in mind, if we hold the article, that article will be taken out of the consent agenda and that will be read and voted on individually. Any article that is not held, they will be voted on within the consent agenda, and then we will go back to the articles that were originally held. So before we go any further, I would like to thank Ray Mead here for stepping up and coming on a vacation day to preside over town meeting, as well as Dave Robbins for being our other deputy moderator for this morning. So without further ado, I would like to bring up Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Well, it's not 85 degrees, but it is nice out here. Only been gone 4 months and they changed the rules already. But I have reviewed the consent process, and it's actually pretty good, and it will speed up the meeting. So just a few rules. Everyone is to wear a mask. Keep your mask on at all times. If you don't wear a mask, you'll be asked to leave. If you'd like to speak, come up to one of the microphones. There's 2 right up front here. Please state your name and address prior to speaking. When everybody leaves, one of the problems that we had back in May, and I know that they had at the graduation also, was a lack of social distancing when everybody leaves. So if you could just maintain social distance when everybody leaves, that would be great. Introductions, Ginny Kramer, who's the town attorney, Carter Terrazini, who's the temporary town administrator, and Dave Meridian's out there somewhere. Not sure where, but he's out there. I told him earlier when I came in, I'm not going to let you talk because we're going to move on. And at this point, I'd like to ask the chairman of the Board of Selectmen to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And again, on consent motions, what it does is, as Peter said, it groups motions together. If anybody wants to speak on any of these motions, just yell hold when we start the process. And with that, Article 1. Oh, Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Deputy Moderator, thank you. Consent motion 1. I move the town vote to combine for consideration Articles 1, 3, 5, and 6 of the warrant for this town meeting, and that the town take affirmative action on said articles as set forth in the motions below, without debate and in accordance with the action proposed under each motion, provided, however, that if any voter prior to taking of the vote requests the right to debate a specific article, then said article shall be removed from this motion and acted upon in the ordinary course of business.
Motion made and seconded. I will ask if there are any motions to be held. Hearing none, this is a majority vote. All those in favor? I'm sorry. What was? I can't hear you, Brooke. Can you go up to the mic? Because I really...
Brooke Badger, 23 North Street. As we go through these, I thought you were going to ask about all of them. So Article 1, letter D. I want to hold on that. It's a
Oh.
$600,000 no cent to stabilization fund.
Okay, so I'm gonna take one out right now, and we'll vote on 3, 5, and 6 later. Article 1. Mr. Carlson.
Motion 1 without Article 1, and then we can bring up Article 1.
We can, that's fine. So what you have in front of you is a consent motion, which combines Articles 3, 5, and 6 with no further discussion. All those in favor? Those opposed? I declare the motion carried. Article 1.
Mr. Deputy Moderator.
Can you just call me Mr. Moderator?
Excuse
Mr.
me.
Carlson.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. I move the town adjust certain line items with the operating budget for FY21 as follows, with each action to be voted as a single block, provided, however, voted that they be treated in accordance with legislative purposes as if each item were voted as a separate article. A, increase the overall appropriations of operating departments. Appropriate the sum of $260,000 and no cents to increase the amounts appropriated for certain departments as follows. Town administrator personnel, $150,000. Town administrator expense, $15,000. Accounting professional technical, $45,000. Elections and registrations of personnel, $13,500. Elections and registrations and expense, $6,500. Health insurance HRA funding, $30,000. Total, $260,000. And meet said appropriation with the transfer of $30,000 from certified free cash and the balance from taxation. B, transfer the sum of $20,000 and no cents between line items within the fire department. C, reduce debt excluded interest by $303,320, no cents, from $2,457,510 to $2,154,190 expenses. D, appropriate the sum of $600,000 and no cents for a contribution to the Municipal Capital Stabilization Fund in the accordance with the previous approved override and to meet said appropriation from taxation.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Paget.
Yes, Brooke Paget, 23 North Street. I guess I just have a couple questions. One, since it's an appropriation of money, and it was, my understanding, only decided to do this on Thursday, and here we are on Saturday, I think it just deserves at least a little discussion rather than just throw it in with a consent and everyone votes for it. It's also my understanding that it wasn't a unanimous vote from the board, so I'm very interested to hear at least from one person who thinks this is a good idea and the one or two people who thought this wasn't a good idea on the board and what their reasonings are before I vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is that better? Okay. So Thursday, there were several options that were discussed at the Select Board meeting with regards to the Capital Stabilization Fund. Last year, when we were talking about this override, we made it clear from the Select Board and the Finance Committee that we did not want to implement this part of the override for this fiscal year. There were some options that I felt that we could exercise, and this is just me personally, that we could defray the costs until next fiscal year by going through special legislation. But after talking with the board made a decision to go forward instead of going with the original $800,000, that they said that we would go with $600,000. And again, the reason why I voted no was because I felt personally that these monies should be, we should somehow use every option available to us to keep up with the promise that we said that we wouldn't implement this for this fiscal year. And that would be through special legislation, or if worst comes to worst, then we go through with another ballot initiative for these $800,000 and we do it again next year. Thank you.
Mr. Paget, I'm assuming you're going to speak again.
Well, I wanted to hear the person who was for it. I mean, I think Peter, if I understand him, he voted against it, but he's for it. I didn't really get that, but I guess I want to hear from someone who says this is a good idea. And I guess my other question is, it's an addition, it is an appropriation. We're going to raise taxes on this, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're going to raise taxes, but I mean, look at who's here. We fought years to get $300,000, $400,000. Here we're going to ask people to pay an additional $600,000 and notify them one day ahead of time. It just seems like, I understand a mistake was made. It's a mistake. You got to suck it up and you got to do it, you know, and bring it back in the regular course of events where people in this town can make a decision and they may vote for it, but they don't even know this is happening. I mean, if you take the people who aren't supposed to be here, there's probably 70 people here. And $600,000, we're going to go up over $17 in the tax rate, is my guess. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but
That's correct.
it's a significant item to just throw in as a paragraph, in my estimation.
So I would say to that that the Select Board is sensitive to the tax rate. And the reason that we moved from the originally approved $800,000 down to the $600,000 that we're appropriating today, if this consent passes, is to be sensitive to that tax increase over time. So if you look at the overall tax increase over the 5-year period that the override was proposed, we're at about the same amount. If we don't do this this year, then we lose this money effectively and we lose our capital program. So the board felt that it was really important to appropriate enough to be able to have a meaningful impact on our capital program, but also we were sensitive to the tax increases. So that was the thinking. Mr. Carlson, we were provided with a number of options in terms of how to remedy this issue. One of the issues that was sort of described by Mr. Carlson was the special legislation. In talking with town council and our temporary town administrator, most of the board didn't feel like that was a good option to go for us because there was significant risk. So if that failed and we didn't at least present this at town meeting, then it would be essentially a lost program and we would have to go back with another override if we were going to get additional monies for that capital program. So that's I think for the people that voted for this, that was the thinking.
Okay, right, this is just my last comment. I'm just going to pick on what Peter said. You promised not to do something, you are now doing that thing, and you gave people one notice that you're doing it. I think you're losing a lot more than a program, the integrity of the board and how we have a town meeting by saying one thing, doing the opposite, and then not letting anybody know more than 48 hours before you do it. That's all.
Yes, sir.
David Libby, 44 George
I
Hill
thought that
Road.
was you, Dave.
It is, hiding behind this thing. I heard language just a minute ago that I largely understood, but there was one piece that confuses me. I think I heard Mr. Often say that if we do not implement this 600,000 or 800,000 this year, that we, quote, lose the capital program. The part that confuses me is that what's implied in what you said is that we lose it forever, even though in this one fiscal year, we don't appropriate and raise that amount of money. We passed an override, which calls for 800,000 a year. So are you telling us that if we fail to collect that amount of money in 1 year, that we lose the ability to do so in all future years?
Mr. Carlson?
Yeah, 1 second, please.
Mr. Terrazini?
Good morning. My name is Carter Terenzini, working at Town Hall temporarily. Unfortunately, that is exactly the case. The overrides to fund stabilization funds must be fully appropriated, or in this case, the $600,000, or you effectively lose it, and you have to come back and do it over again. I think part of the confusion was people viewed it as one single question, but from a statutory standpoint, it really was two separate questions. And DOR has extensive regulation backing up the statute that requires it be appropriated prior to the tax rate being set. So the board, in looking at the various alternatives, decided that reducing the amount to be asked for was the lesser of the risks in trying to make sure that you did have a program going forward. This $600,000 is then preserved for the future. And Ms. Kramer may have something to add on that. She consulted with me as we worked our way through that issue, and also consulted with DOR counsel to affirm our belief. And Ms. Oliver's not able to be with us this morning, principal assessor, but she also reviewed the statute and the instructional guidance release from DOR. And the three of us and those we consulted with are in agreement on that interpretation of the statute and regulation.
So, I appreciate that. So by reducing this amount from 800,000 to 600,000, have we reduced our ability to raise money for capital improvements by 200,000 in all future years?
Correct.
So that's a serious implication for capital improvement projects in this town. By doing this, we're giving up 25% of everything we could ever fund. And frankly, I think while I understand the motivation, in this particular year, I think that in the long term is a poor solution.
Further discussion on Article 1? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to just address that, if it's okay.
Mr. Often?
So we recognize that we are giving up a little bit of money for capital stabilization. The intention of the board, though, is going forward, we have the ability to raise that $600,000 by 2.5%. And the intention of the board is to raise that amount by 2.5% each year to be able to have a more gradual tax increase, but also be able to keep up with inflation in terms of our capital management.
Ms. Often.
Laura Often, 79 Old Westboro Road. I just wanted to follow up on something that Mr. Pageant said. This was within the override that people voted for, the original $800,000. Now I understand the reasoning for bringing it down to $600,000, but I just want to say I don't feel tricked or anything. I think there was a discussion that from the last board, I don't even remember, that maybe we would hold off appropriating the money the first year, but now we know we can't do that. So we voted for this back in June, and I'm in very much support of keeping our capitalization money, and I don't feel as though I'm being tricked or somebody didn't do a promise. We promised to start working on our massive capital backlog, and this will help do it. So I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Mr. Paget.
23 North Street, Brook Paget. I know I promised not to come back up, but going back on what Mr. Libby said, if they really believe that this is essential, he's 100% correct. They're leaving $200,000 at the table infinitum. So it's irresponsible to do it that way. If they think that then it's a mistake, apparently. If they think it should be cured, they should do what they requested, because apparently when they told the town they needed X amount of money, they had reasons for $800,000. If we really only needed $600,000 with a 2.5% increase every year, you should have asked for $600. You're now changing it to get it through town meeting, but you're losing millions of dollars because you're never going to make that up on the 2.5%. So I would suggest that you should have changed this to 800, stay stuck with your guns because you really believed what you're saying, not reduce it because you think it'd be easier to pass at this town meeting.
Yes, sir. Mr. Haddad.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to make a motion to amend line item D and increase the amount from $600,000 to $800,000.
Mark, I need it in writing. How many times have you heard that in your life? Hey, I'm temporary.
Deputy Moderator.
Okay. Well, I thought today was going to go really fast. So before you have a amendment to Article 1 that increases the dollar figure from $600,000 to $800,000. Discussion on Mr. Haddad's amendment. Yes, sir.
Hi, Scott LeBlanc, 25 Trinity Ave. I'd like to know first how much the $600,000 would change our tax rate, and now also what this $800,000 would do to change our tax rate.
Mr. Terenzini.
Carter Terenzini, temporary town administrator. First, let me please always give the warning that nothing is final until the Department of Revenue signs off on everything. Ms. Oliver's estimate of the tax rate prior to this issue being found was $16.96. The $600,000 would raise that to $17.18. It is roughly $30,000. $30,000 is a penny. That changes a little bit as you move up due to some rounding off. Moving from the $600,000 to the $800,000 would move the $17.18 to $17.25. Again, that's all within a penny or so of rounding, depending upon the final numbers that the Department of Revenue approves and their final certification. Hopefully that.
One last follow-up. How would that impact us? I know that in the past we've been told that for example, on a 400, an average household's taxes would increase by X amount based on how much money is being spent by the town. Do we have an estimate of what the average person's tax bill will increase based on these numbers?
400,000? So let's use a typical house assessed at, not market value, but assessed by the town at $400,000. Moving to the full $800,000 will raise that approximately $116, I believe, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Spinney?
Hi, Bruce Spinney, 71 Potter Hill Road. I, like the majority of town, voted for the override in the spring. We voted for $800,000 to go for the capital program. I don't see town meeting changing the decision of a ballot question in this fashion. I don't like it. Having voted for it back then, if we appropriate the $800,000 today, which is what we kind of signed off for, I know there was an agreement that we would pass for a year. Are there any other vehicles internal to the operating budget where you can offset some of these funds coming in? I know in the past we've often taken stuff in and out of the operational budget that could be considered capital. Some of us did consider them capital. Cruisers, I'm sure the school committee does some capital programs on their own internal to their budget. I'm sure some departments do as well. Has there been any thought into offsetting in that manner? And then of course you get to keep your promise. There's a little bit more diligence that needs to happen on the operational budget side, but can it be done that way instead?
Mr. Haddad, do you want to go to the mic? You know, 2020 has been an awful year with COVID and the presidential election and everything like that. And I think we just turned a corner. Biden won. Mr. Haddad.
Yeah, just for a point of clarification, the $116 is for the full 800,000, correct?
Yes, that's...
Okay, so the question was asked, how much is the extra 200,000 of that 116?
$30 plus or minus.
Thank you.
Further discussion on Mr. Haddad's amendment. Yes, sir.
Jeremy Graves, 4 Whitney Street. I just want to speak to the idea of what promises were made and what we voted for. It was, obviously everyone remembers the override. It wasn't a lot of fun. It was very stressful, and it was touch and go. That override voted this money in. The timing of it is being affected by a mistake and a technicality. I think imperiling the money that this town solidly supported putting into our funds to stabilize our operations is the priority, and I support the full amount.
Further discussion. Yes, sir.
Gopal Shenoy, 5 Chipper Drive. I just want to let you know, the way I see it is, as many other people have said, the town voted for $800,000 override. If there was no misunderstanding or whatever, we wouldn't even be discussing it today. So there is nothing like we are tricking residents of the town who are not present here of passing something as big as 800,000. They've already said that this has passed, the vast majority of the town. So I just want to make sure that people understand that. If we don't do this, 2.5% of 0 is 0. So we just have to understand that. So it's not tricking anybody and trying to pull a shenanigan here, saying that the attendance is low or whatever. This is something that has been voted by the town and passed in the last town meeting. And I don't know if I'm going to use the right terms. I'm also would like to ask the town moderator to make a motion to move this discussion and take a vote.
I've got one more person here that's
Okay.
it's going to do that? Yeah, I mean, it's not going to do that, but it's going to speak.
Margaret Haynes, 25 Trinity Avenue. This 800,000 should be part of the override. The override is not changing. So there is the potential to spend an additional $800,000. The other thing is that we weren't going to spend $800,000 this year at all. And so now we're going to spend it and we're going to tax for it. And we're doing it with like 3 days notice with, I don't know how many people watched the select board meeting, and there are certainly not a lot of people here. And I don't think we've been tricked, but we hear so often about accountability and responsibility and transparency, and those things are missing. I understand that the $800,000 was supposed to be part of the override, but the override is not being changed. And so there is the potential for us to be paying twice for this amount because of a mistake that was made. And I've yet to see anybody stand up and say, we made a mistake and this is how we have to handle it. We kind of launched right into, give us $600,000. That's all.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Moderator,
Mr. Carlson?
I'd like to move the question.
Motion made and seconded to move the question. If you vote in the affirmative, it will cut off all debate on Article 1, on Mr. Haddad's amendment. If you vote in the negative, it will continue debate on Mr. Haddad's amendment. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? Declare the motion carried. The motion before you is Mr. Haddad's amendment to Article 1 to appropriate the sum of $800,000 for the contribution to the Municipal Center Capitalization Fund in accordance with previously approved override and meet said appropriation for taxes. This is a majority vote, and with all those in favor? All those opposed? Declare the motion carried. The article before you is Article 1. Further discussion on Article 1? Yes, sir.
Gregory Marr, 36 Ferry Street. A mistake was made in interpretation of how capital stabilization overrides work. There is language in how capital stabilization overrides that allow you to skip a year and then continue the following year with appropriation based on the previous year on which it was assessed. It was assumed that this also applied to the first year, and that in the second year you could appropriate it at the original amount specified in the override. The guidance is now saying that that is not possible, so we have to include it this year or lose it. It is possible in the future, say next year, to not appropriate it and make up for that difference. So what we could do is just move it 1 year up and have the same net effect as starting it next year. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Brian Langevin, 4 Millstone Drive. The previous speaker, Mr. Marr, touched on this a bit, but I would like either somebody from the select board or somebody more eloquent than myself to address what I believe was incorrect statement that somehow this is potentially going to get clawed out twice. I don't believe there's any potential for this $800,000 to get taxed twice, and I would just like somebody more eloquent than myself to make that point. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Prisby.
So 2 things. Yeah, no, it's not going to be taxed twice. In fact, you could raise it and then not necessarily spend it, but that's sort of a different question. And then to Ms. Haynes' point, here I am. I'm standing up saying we made a mistake. And that's how we're here.
Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Scott Rossiter, 2 Stonewall Drive. Thanks for being here today, Mr. Deputy Moderator.
No problem, Scott. Sorry I didn't recognize you.
So one of the things I love about our transparent town meetings, and let me say that I don't think anybody here believes that we're being tricked. I don't know who used that phrase first, but I don't feel like we're being tricked. I think that, you know, we just made a mistake and we're trying to figure out how to fix it. One of the things I love, though, is when I can depend on my finance committee to advise me what they think of every motion. So I'd like to know what the finance committee thinks of this motion.
Mr. Haddad?
The Finance Committee voted unanimously this morning to support the $600,000. I was listening to the debate, and I thought it made sense to raise it to $800,000. That was done by me as a single, as a resident of the town, not as a member of the Finance Committee. We can poll members of the FinCom now to see if they support it or not, but we did support the original motion of $600,000.
Thank you.
If the Finance Committee is in favor of that, could it just stand, please? If you're in favor of that? They're in favor. Further discussion on Article 1. Hearing none, the motion before you is I move the town adjust certain line items within the operating budget for FY21 as follows, with each action being voted as a single block provided, however voted, that they will be treated for accounting and legislative purposes as if each item were voted on as a separate article, with Mr. Haddad's amendment from $600,000 to $800,000, and with no further discussion. All those in favor? All those opposed? I declare the motion carried. Hey, Paul, this is all I got. You don't have to.
Mr. Moderator.
Ms. Roy?
Nope.
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Fazio. It's
Mr.
okay.
Fazio, sorry.
It's the mask.
You both sound the same.
There we go, Colleen. I move the town appropriate the sum of $58,269.82 to pay the following late bills incurred in a previous fiscal year for the following vendors in the following amounts, and meet said appropriation by a transfer from certified free cash.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, this requires a 9/10 vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? Declare the motion carried by the required 9/10. Mr. Often?
Mr. Deputy Moderator, I move that the town vote to combine...
Now you're just busting me now.
A little bit. I move that the town vote to combine for consideration Articles 4, 15, 16, and 17 of the warrant for this town meeting, and that town take affirmative action on said articles as set forth in the motions below without debate and in accordance with the action proposed under each motion, provided, however, that if any voter prior to the taking of the vote requests the right to debate a specific article, then said article shall be removed from this motion and acted upon in the ordinary course of business.
Motion made and seconded. I will ask if there are any holds. Yes. Mr. Libby? Mr. Libby, you got to tell me what you're holding on.
Hold on 16 and 17.
16 and 17?
Let's say 15 too.
As I get older, and I listen to a lot of loud music, and I still do, I can't hear. So come up to the mic, please, if you're going to hold on something. Oh, Mr.
Well,
Paget.
I'm just going to say, from what I'm hearing, it's 15, 16, and 17.
Article 4. Someone. It's the, it. Okay, Article 4, with no further discussion, all those in favor? Those opposed? Declare the motion carried. Article 15.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Paget.
Brooke Paget, 23 North Street. I have a similar question on 15, 16, and 17. I get the whole consent agenda. Putting sick and buyback, which is not going to get anyone to say no to, with these other three, to me seems a little questionable, particularly since we have two charter amendments, or two bylaw amendments and one charter amendment, and Article 17 was voted down last town meeting. So to jam that in with a bunch of other ones on a consent agenda, I just don't think is responsible for the board. And I think they need to discuss 15, 16, 17 and tell us why they're doing it, not just say consent to it and let's all go home because it's warm.
Further discussion on Article 15. Mr. Haddad. Did anybody bring beer? Oh.
The Finance Committee recommended and brought forward or submitted for consideration Articles 15 and 16. The Finance Committee is the only committee in town that's appointed outside of a public process. There is no public input, there is no posting of a meeting, there is no discussion on the candidates in the public. So we felt that because the Finance Committee is a very important committee that makes recommendations to town meeting, there should be a more public process on how they are appointed. So we came up with an idea that has been used in other towns. It's used in the town that I work in, the town of Groton, where we have a 3-member board that appoints members of the Finance Committee and reappoints members of the Finance Committee. It has to be posted. You have to follow the open meeting law rules, and you have to go through a process. Names have to be put into consideration, and they have to be voted on by a committee before they're appointed. The Finance Committee is the only standing committee in town that is not appointed in that fashion, and we thought it was important to do that. Thank you.
Further discussion on Article 15. I just want to say I appointed Finance Committee members for 21 years, and if I had feelings, they'd be hurt right now, but not really. Further discussion on Article 15. Yes, sir.
Bob Foley, 45 South Street. I just don't agree with having the Finance Committee member being a part of choosing the new members. That's my only comment.
Further discussion on Article 15.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Carlson.
I just have a point of order here, just on procedural matter, if I may. Because we held on these following articles, should we be reading the articles as individual motions and discussing them? Because right now you're putting them technically in like another consent. I understand, but should we be reading the article? Yes, we should read the article.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr.
I
Hoffman.
move that we waive the reading and approve the article as published in the warrant for this town meeting, accepting the phrases to see if the town will vote and or take any other action relative thereto.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on Article 15? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Declare the motion carried. Article 16.
Mr. Moderator, I move to waive the reading and approve the article as published in the warrant for this town meeting, accepting the phrases to see if the town will vote and or to take any other action related thereto.
Motion made and seconded with no further discussion. All those in favor? Those opposed? Declare the motion carried. Article 17.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Often.
I move to waive the reading and approve the article as published in the warrant for this town meeting, accepting the phrases to see if the town will vote and or to take any other action related thereto.
Motion made and seconded. I know that Mr. Libby was held on 17.
CIPC.
Dave Lemmy, 44 George Hill Road. One question. What is the purpose for bringing this article back to town meeting now, given that it was brought to a previous town meeting and defeated? What are we trying to accomplish and why?
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Carlson.
No, Mr. Often.
Okay.
This article is coming back from a previously proposed article. CIPC took the output from and commentary from the town meeting where this was discussed and lost by just a few votes. We made some adjustments. We met with CPC. Hopefully, Mr. Scarlett will be able to speak to that a little bit. And we think we've more closely aligned our bylaw article with the actual recommendations from the DOR. And we've removed the concerns that we had, which primarily came from CPC.
Mr. Scarlett.
Yes, thank you. Paul Scarlett, 47 Carroll Road. We did meet with the folks that are proposing this change to our bylaws, and that was done at our request. We found out that this was moving forward again late in the game and asked them to come. So I know they say they looked into the issues that were brought up, but they didn't come to us when they were having that discussion, just to make that point. What I would like, and I know that there was some conversation at CPC related to how this committee will interact with us. CPC does not use capital budget funds. However, a lot of the projects that we do come from the department heads and could allow the town to not use capital funds by instead utilizing CPC. So I still don't feel I had a complete explanation of how this committee will interact with CPC, which already has a very detailed process for evaluating projects and bringing them to town meeting. So if somebody could speak to that, and then I have one other thing I would like to ask.
Mr. Moderator, I'm willing to speak to that.
Okay.
Gregory Marr, 36 Ferry Street. I am a member of CIPC. First, this motion is the warrant article is being brought to you by the Select Board, not the CIPC, just a minor clarification. Second, as we explained to you in the meeting that we had with you at your request, this does not affect CPC funding process at all. This is an advisory committee to the town administrator and the Select Board, and it simply provides a service of reviewing the capital budget items that are submitted to the town administrator and the Select Board by the department heads and ranking them in order of priority. And the second thing that it does is it produces a 5-year capital plan so that the town may know what we are spending capital money on now and what we plan on spending it in the future. And including in that plan is what we've spent it on in the past. So as we explained at CPC, the only thing that we request of CPC is that when they complete a project, they let us know that, that the project's been completed so we can update it in the plan. There is nothing that CPC does has to go through us, and they are free to continue operating exactly as they have in the past. Thank you.
Mr. Scarlett.
My other question has to do with my understanding that this process has actually already been put in place this year. That is, in fact, before this vote is even taking place, being done. So if that is the case, and I'd like Mr. Terenzini to talk about that, what is the need for changing our bylaw if you can implement it without that change? And depending on what that reason is, how does that impact our search for a new town administrator? How would they view the impact of what is being proposed? Thank you.
Mr. Terenzini.
Carter Terenzini, temporary town administrator. I think that as long as one views So the way this has worked in the past, my understanding is that the town administrator, who is charged with the responsibility under your charter with developing a capital plan, would develop that plan, give it to the CIPC for review and comment. The process that has been used in many other communities, and which is envisaged by this proposal, would kind of turn that a little bit upside down, if you will, where the department heads would go to the CIPC, they would submit, they would get review at the CIPC would review and rank those projects, and then turn all of that legwork, all that homework, and that 11 by 17, one or more pages spreadsheet with the various rankings into the town administrator, who would then review that with all that legwork done, discuss things during the budget process with the department heads, and would begin to do what we call capital rationing. Rarely is there enough money to undertake all projects. As long as the town administrator respects that part of the process, and I frankly think that most town administrators would frankly welcome someone doing a lot of that legwork for them, particularly as processes are continually added to offices and resources are lean. And the CIPC respects the role of the town administrator, who has to do that final capital rationing, do that final budgeting. As long as everybody kind of understands where the white line is and they stay on their respective side of the boundaries, I suspect that this will work very well. There's always a potential a town administrator could read the charter and say, well, this is what it says, and you're trying to do this over here. But I think that you're going to find most prospective town administrators will welcome this, will respect it, and the only time there should be a problem is if one side or the other forgets which side of the 40-yard line here they're on. I don't think it will impact your search for a town administrator, quite frankly.
Yes, sir.
Jeremy Graves, 4 Whitney Street. Excuse me. I am on CIPC as well, but I'm speaking just as a resident. This bylaw is different in meaningful ways from what was voted on a year ago. We took great pains to make it clear this is an advisory committee only. The intent here is a group of citizens want to be able to see all of the capital expenditures in town so that they can present a clearer picture, including everything, including groups that haven't traditionally been pulled in, just to try to create a clearer, more complete picture upon which then decisions can be made. Yes, the CIPC will rank recommendations on how that money should be spent, but there is no compulsion anywhere down the line to follow those recommendations. So it's a volunteer group with no power to actually impede any of the existing processes that's trying to provide a clear financial picture to the town, and I would encourage your support. The question of why a bylaw is needed here, it's not. But by passing the bylaw, we strengthen the voice and the force of this committee. This committee serves essentially the select board. There may be finer points on that, so forgive me if I'm a little bit off there. But it's an advisory committee. It can exist as it exists now, and it's doing the best that it can with what it has now. What we're trying to do is solidify the footing of this committee in a manner that we think benefits the whole town. Thank you.
Mr. Spinney.
Bruce Spinney, 71 Potter Hill Road. I'm not going to reiterate what Jeremy just mentioned, but having served on CIPC a decade ago and having operated with that CIPC with this type of agenda, and then to serve in other roles and capacities in the town and see that it was not continued, I believe the bylaw is indeed definitely necessary to provide the continuity of the service that CIPC provides, and I think it does actually add another layer of transparency. At the end of the day, capital projects are paid for when they come to town meeting. But to have this type of plan ahead of it, especially seeing that we just spent $800,000 a year to do this program, when I come back in the spring, I would like to have a matured list that I can review all the projects and see what's coming year after year. And that's something that wasn't provided in the past. And this says it has to be provided. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Gregory Barr, 36 Ferry Street. I just want to address the question of if the committee is operating now, why is this bylaw needed? It does fill a minor hole in between the charter and the bylaws, and that section 6-7 of the town charter mentions that the town administrator puts together the capital package with input from the capital planning committee if it is provided by the bylaws, and this fills that thing by the bylaws. As it is currently, the committee is solely charged by the select board, and this just fills a minor inconsistency in that the charter says we should have this, or the town administrator should use this if it exists, but it doesn't actually exist.
Mr. Paget.
Brooke Paget, 23 North Street. Just a couple things. I don't think Mr. Spinney was correct on that. It's every year a capital program is put out by the town administrator's office. It has been for 30 years. Whether people look at it or not is another question. The issue here, it sounds to me, is, as Jeremy was saying, it's kind of much to do about nothing until it becomes something, right? The town administrator has to make the budget. And he looks at the capital programs, he looks at what money has to be spent on. We always have more needs than we have money. Somebody has to make that decision. And since ultimately the town administrator makes the budget, he needs to have that idea of what he wants to do or what the town needs in the beginning. Here we're flipping it around and asking volunteers to decide that and then give that to the town administrator. And then those two, somebody said, negotiate it out. I also say, Jeremy said, we need this, it's no big deal, except we need this to give us more authority. Well, as I said, for Jeremy and a couple other people on CIPC, it may be fine until it's not fine. And the CIPC and the members on there want to put in a swimming pool or whatever they want to do and hold back those numbers so that we can't do a budget, then we're going to have a problem. So I think it's not a big deal, I guess. I'd prefer to have the numbers coming from the professional and then discuss it with the volunteers rather than having the volunteers do the numbers and then come to the professionals. It's awesome. We've all served on boards. We're not professionals. We hire people. We spend a lot of money on town accountants, on town administrators, and we're always second-guessing them. I get it. But to take more and more authority away from them is, in the long run, it's just going to, they may like it now because they're on the board. But if that board switches tomorrow to 5 new people, these same 5, and whoever's on the CIPC is going to be up here complaining about it. Because I was there when we started the CIPC, and it was a great idea, and it was immediately taken over by people who didn't want to build a library. And they said, oh, we got to go through CIPC about the library. And there was a fight about the library. And then it had to do with the school. And then it had to do, and its tentacles went everywhere. So I think, it seems to me that I'm in Pennsylvania here, that I'm losing and I'm Donald Trump. It's 80-20. That this is probably going to pass. But just remember, when we come back here 2 years from now and it is a cluster, this is why.
Mr. Moderator?
Brooke, a cluster is, I think, a fire department term. Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Moderator? I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. Fazio.
I just, Doreen DeFazio, 46 North Street. I just want to address some of the concerns that Mr. Paget just brought up. I actually voted against this article when it came up to town meeting last time, and I am voting in favor of it this time, and I'd like to explain why, and again, address some of the issues Mr. Paget brought up. So, first of all, to clarify, CIPC will have no authority to choose what capital projects are chosen. And we went over this article a couple of times at select board meetings, and I wanted to make sure that no authority is taken away from the town administrator or the select board to make final decisions on the budget. And it is not, and it is worded that way. And I think in terms of the fact that we are in a different climate now in Grafton, we're about to hire a new town administrator, that we don't know what the confidence level will be of this town administrator moving forward, that it's a good idea to have a committee of citizens who say, this is what we're recommending, and have the town administrator recommend something. And even if the town administrator were to choose his capital budget instead of anything on CIPC's, all of that will remain transparent. And so I'm voting in favor of this article for those reasons. I am very sensitive to taking away any authority from the town administrator when it comes to capital budgeting, and I do not see this article doing that.
Yes, ma'am.
Lisa Rice, 40 Browns Road. Brooke stated it at the heart of this. You either believe one person is guiding our town, the town administrator, or you believe we are guiding our town. So that's what a yes vote is for this. The more we give Grafton members a voice, the better off we're all going to be.
Mr. Libby.
I'd like to move the question.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to move the question. If you vote in the affirmative, it will cut off all debate on Article 17. If you vote in the negative, it will continue debate on Article 17. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? Declare the motion carried. The motion before you is Article 17 with no further discussion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Declare the motion carried. Consent motion number 3. Ms. Roy.
I move the town vote to combine for consideration Articles 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 of the warrant for this town meeting, and that the town take affirmative action on the said articles as set forth in the motions below, without debate and in accordance with the actions proposed under each motion, provided, however, that if any voter prior to taking the vote requests the right to debate a specific article, then said article shall be removed from the motion and acted upon in accordance or in ordinary course of business.
Motion made and seconded. Is anybody requesting a hold? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Declare the motion carried. Articles, hang on. Article 12.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Prisby.
I move to waive the reading and approve the article as published in the warrant for this town meeting, accepting the phrases, quote, to see if the town will vote, end quote, and, quote, or to take any other action related thereto, end quote.
Motion made and seconded. With no further discussion, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? I declare the motion carried by the required 2/3. Article 4, consent motion 4. Ms. Roy.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to combine for consideration Articles 13, 18, and 19 of the warrant for this town meeting, and that the town take affirmative action on said articles as set forth in the motions below, without debate and in accordance with the actions proposed under each motion, provided, however, that if any voter prior to taking the vote requests the right to debate a specific article, then said article shall be removed from the motion and acted upon in ordinary course of business.
Motion made and seconded. Are there any holds? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Declare the motion carried.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Often.
I move to waive the reading and approve the article as published in the warrant for this town meeting, accepting the phrase, quote, to see if the town will vote, unquote, and, quote, or to take any other action related thereto, unquote.
I'm sorry, we're on Article 14, Bob. Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the ocean? On the ocean. Yeah, I wish I was there right now. A discussion on the motion. Hearing none, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? I declare the motion carried by the required 2/3. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Thank you. Please, Lee, please social distance on your way out.